timing and keeping track.
Oh yeah, somebody timing. I'm not timing. Not it.
Alright, I will be the dude, yes. Good job, man. Give me a second.
I have one of those fancy Radio Shack ones.
No, they ain't fancy.
Like a pendulum.
Alright, I'm straight. Let's go.
Cool. Very good.
Grandfather.
Go for it.
The United States federal government should substantially increase its economic engagement towards Cuba, Mexico, or Venezuela. What is economic engagement? In the context of resolution B, begin the 1AC by defining economic engagement as the antithesis of equal relationships and cooperation, the opposite of itself. Engagement is exploitation and subjugation of people, ideas, and things, and the never-ending expansion of economic power. In the debate space, economic engagement manifests itself in cross-sex. When we look at the judge, instead of communicating with our opponents, we are trying to speak at each other, to always argue, not to ask open-ended questions for fear that the other person will talk too much or actually answer our questions. Wins are the currency of debate. One can use them to purchase friends, battles, and cheer, advantage, trash talking can be used as a weapon if you try hard enough, and people cut other debaters to little pieces, hoping to regain some credibility. Women and people of color are merely spectacles and statistics, numbers, which we use to create the illusion of diversity. They are meant to be seen, but not to be heard. In American foreign policy, economic engagement is the way in which we treat people in other countries. We see each country's only its government and engage with its government through primarily itself, which means this is epitomized in the Washington Consensus, an umbrella policy used so the U.S. would look like the benevolent of Latin America. We overthrow leaders who we dislike and replace them with people we can manipulate like puppets. We force engagement in countries and ignore their resistance. Venezuela is currently the leader of the anti-American movement. They rally countries and have publicly stated that they are going to stand for the disrespectful neoliberal way that America engages with the rest of the world. Our response was to ignore them, only reacting when they threw out American ambassadors when we declared a quid pro quo and threw out exactly the same number of Venezuelan ambassadors. Profit-driven decision-making also leads to environmental destruction in the name of monetary success. All of these actions can be characterized with one word: neoliberalism. The framework underlying every policy the United States does, making market efficiency the prioritization for social interaction. The resolution is an invitation to critically examine our method of engagement. Reading the resolution is a call to action, the equivalent of handing somebody a blank check. The global neoliberalism of our policy-making and knowledge production shields us from developing critical thought about American foreign policy. The same global trends and relationships we sustain with other people, corrupting and contaminating the way what we understand a friend is. This is the primary reason why we think that new ideas don't belong. We accept the resolution without interrogating you. Why don't we write the topic paper or the topic and voicing about value in order for us to question down the structure of neoliberalism within international policies and within our interpersonal relationships results in contaminated social cooperation. Alexis and I have people literally stand in front of us before the speech had even ended to give us a cross-check or stab at us for no reason. People read wrong form counterplans and then told us that they weren't actually telling us to get out. Everyone read generic framework blocks against us. No one actually listened. No one actually understood that we had debated switch side for 2 years. No one engaged me in a discussion of my narrative. No one bothered to analyze the value of having a debate about debate, and no one established what they think the debate space should look like. We're telling you now we're offended by people who ignore the 1AC, the narrative matters. We're telling you now that debate is personal, and discussion of personal experiences is a good thing. Let's talk about people because debate doesn't exist without them. Let's talk about interpersonal relationships because knowing how to coexist with the rest of your species in a way that doesn't hurt thousands of people is more valuable than pretending to pass policies and learning to abuse other countries. This is an impact poetry 10. Voice is the value about value or second-order value. A particular discourse, neoliberalism has come to dominate the contemporary world. That discourse operates with a view of economic life that does not value voice, opposes that view of economic life on politics. View or directive view of politics is the implementing of market functioning in the process. Neoliberal discourse vacuums entirely the place of the social in politics. Politics is regulation of economics. Voice interrupts neoliberalism's view of economics and economic life. Challenges neoliberalism's claim that its view of politics is market functioning Trump. All others enable us to build an alternative view of politics that is partly oriented to non-process view of voice. Include within that view of politics the recognition of people's capacities for social cooperation based on voice. The value of voice articulates some basic aspects of human life that are relevant whatever our views and or justice to establishing common ground between contemporary frameworks for evaluating economic, social, and political organization. Dear debate, the United States federal government should, are words imprinted into my mind by your adamant policing of my agency. The words change, but the arguments that I spit out are exactly the same, and it always came down to playing pretend. We pretend to be policymakers, and then a judge chooses their favorite pretend policy, and nothing happens for all of 2 years. I thought that pretending was good for my education. The more times I practice pretending, the better I'll be at pretending. You stole from me the knowledge that I was an agent of change. It took me 2 whole years to realize that playing a game doesn't get you ready for real life. Stealing back my agency happened over the course of a month. This past summer, I spent a month trying to reconfigure my approach to debate. I had to reprogram myself to question the foundation of my beliefs. I forced myself to value the opinions of people that snippy and to listen to people I met like Judy Butler and John Sharp with an open mind. I met new people this summer and debated with someone whose experiences in life have been completely different from mine, and she really opened my eyes. One common idea stuck out to me in all my conversations, especially during the Pirates lecture: don't put yourself into debate. Put debate into, don't put debate into, put yourself into debate. Debate is the culture and values established by the community. Without us, debate doesn't exist. And first, it conforms to an activity dependent upon our individuality is ridiculous. Once I changed the way I thought about debate, I stopped trying to become the perfect pretend policymaker. Judy Butler spent 3 weeks explaining to me why understanding the implications of our actions is important, and the power of a nuclear explosion is only one of those implications, but we have to analyze the implications for all who our action could affect, which means the object of our action is just as relevant as ourselves in every perspective matters. We ignore interpersonal relationships in the spirit of winning as if we were at war. We kill every soldier who is wearing the wrong color. We don't try to figure out we analyze the statistics instead of understanding how many civilians just died. We play a superficial game and forget that we are only playing pretend. At the culmination of this analysis, I looked at myself. What kind of game was I playing? And was it time for that game to change? Asking myself these questions and putting some thought into them, I realized that the wins and losses don't mean it's a game. There's more at stake than just a win. There comes a point where our education is compromised. Because if I really wanted to play a game, I'd be at home right now. Last year, I had to force myself to stay in the activity because it was a place where I didn't ever want to be, a place where we refused to engage because it might cost us W. We have a caste system and debate, a social class organization that doesn't belong in an academic activity. I spent too long at the edge of the cliff, ready to quit. I was lucky enough that someone gave me the right answers to the right questions, but not everyone is so fortunate. October 18th, 2013, Dear Nikki and Lexi, from one outsiders to two other outsiders. In 2011, I attended the Tournament of Champions at Kentucky University with Demir Davis and Miguel Feliciano from Beacon High School. I've been working with them whenever possible since the beginning of their junior year when we met at Scranton's tournament. Scott Odekirk was hired by the team to determine that year to do a website following the events of the tournament, including full debate rounds and interviews with various people at the tournament. He interviewed a lot of my colleagues, and by the third day of the tournament, he and I were swapping debate stories when he asked whether he could interview for the tournament's website so he could get an outsider's perspective on the tournament. I have been coaching debate professionally since 1983 while still in college, served for 10 years at Northwestern Institute, 15 at Emory Institute, started coaching full-time straight out of college in 1986 for Emory University, coach at Woodward Academy. I'm the co-founder of the Stanford Institute and senior faculty there since its inception. Now the first urban debate lab with such a team I accompanied to the tournament ended up undefeated in the top seed. I was stunned by his conception of what and who is inside the community of debate. If I am an outsider, what exactly does it take to be an insider? It seems that 28 years of successful participation of what some would consider the highest levels of the national debate scene earned me the status of outsider. This is a stunning level of insularity where a 28-year veteran in the process is still considered an outsider regardless of either the success of my teams or the depth of my relationship with debaters. It became clear that regardless of the level or quality of my participation in debate, that I would never achieve insider status. For some people's minds, I imagine insider status has less to do with coaching or even success, but much more to do with an intellectual commitment to a certain way of thinking that supports the status quo of debate, one that I do not ascribe to, and because of that, I can never be considered inside the community. Judy Butler. How we verify our truth claims is predicated upon four main parts. One, organic intellectuals and those who artistically disrupt hegemonic structures by forming coalitions. Two, academic intellectuals deemed experts in the field by society credentials, lend them ethos in the public sphere. Three, personal narratives and sharing of personal experiences by the movement mind. Narrative is a truth claim. Four, subjugated knowledge of the genealogies and narratives which are co-opted and pushed out of the public sphere by oppressive narrative. The entirety of the money's functions is a way to expose subjugated knowledge. An effective formation of truth claims is imperative to the development of good knowledge production. One, find something to be untrue, it is unethical and bad for education. This person was to read that argument anyway. Reading arguments without analyzing their truth value bankrupts our decision-making capabilities, and without a balanced understanding of truth, we assume that the knowledge we have is truth, and oftentimes the academies from which we gain our knowledge are driven by dominant knowledge. Changing the way we understand truth and finding the best way to identify the basis of policies is critical to epistemological growth and critical thinking. The judge is placed in a position to be an individual analyzing policy and ultimately to be a teacher in an academic activity. We facilitate the analysis of the underlying framework of every economic interaction in Latin America. Critical pedagogy is interlinked with ethical questions and ideology. It is the only way to be able to operate in the real world, not the make-believe one we create by playing pretend or 11. Most schools and colleges of education are now dominated by conservative ideologies, way to instrumentalize accountability measures and run by administrators who lack understanding of education as a force for strengthening the imagination, expanding democratic public life, that the market-driven logic of neoliberal capitalism continues to devalue all aspects of public good. One consequence has been that the education concerned with excellence has been removed from mathematics to equity. Too many classrooms at all levels of schooling now resemble a dead zone for critical thinking. Was not about the task of simply reproducing the past and understanding the present. On the contrary, offers a way of thinking beyond the present, entering into a critical dialogue with history and imagining the future that did not merely reproduce the present. Critical pedagogy thus invest in both in the practice of self-criticism by the value that inform teaching and critical self-consciousness. Architect card consciousness.
Okay. CX.
So the affirmative has the burden of pro-joinder and the negative has the burden of rejoinder. What do you
Says who?
Says argumentation. What do we have to disprove to win this debate?
There are many levels on which you can contest the 1AC. I'm sure you know what we're all.
Okay, so what is the advocacy that will defend?
We defend the 8 minutes in the 1AC as well as everything that we've done within the debate.
Everything you've done in the debate meeting.
Like, performance is fluid, so if I've done something to this tournament that personally offends you and you feel like that's a ground for critique, yes.
Okay. Does economic engagement good or bad?
We think the way that it happened in the status quo is bad.
Okay. Do you do anything to change that?
No.
Okay. So, what is your advocacy? Just tell me your story.
Sure. So do you want me to retell the entire story of the 1AC or my personal story?
Your personal story. Why didn't you choose the debate?
Alright, sure. So, why didn't I?
Yeah, why didn't you?
Okay, so last year, I had a partner who I felt very excluded from the community when I debated with her. I felt like a lot of times people spoke to her instead of speaking to me. I didn't have a chance to have like a discussion with anybody in a lot of my debates because, first of all, I was double wrong, which I didn't think was I deserved. Maybe I did. But the second aspect of that was just like I would go into rounds and she would leave without me, or it was like I would go into rounds and later the other team would remember my partner and not remember me. And it was like the entire debate culture that kind of like went along with this, where people would like talk to her in hallways while I was standing right next to her and literally just like ignore that I was there. That happens to my sister.
You suffering from your partner last year? Why is that a reason for deferred valid?
It's not, okay, Michael, it's not like my experience, my experience with my partner was isolated. It's something that's prevalent throughout the debate community, and the reason why an affirmative ballot should be had is not because of my, like, it's not like, oh, I told you my story, now vote for me. That's not the way, like, we
discuss.
What
does affirmative ballot signify? Why do you
Sure, so one of the things that we discuss is, like, the way that we evaluate truth. Another thing that we discuss is, like, the exposure of these voices, like, through our movement and the discussion that we have in the debate round. We think that's important. Well, I give my voice, and then I invite other people to give up their voices, because I feel like a lot of times we don't give that invitation.
The thing I don't understand is why do you need a ballot for this? If you are willing to have a discussion and a dialogue, why can you not forfeit the ballot so we can have this discussion?
Sure, Michael, because if you are going to, like, contradict this 1AC, and the way that I see my 1AC and the way that Alexis and I put it together, we believe that this is a truth claim, right? So we find this to be true, which means that if this is true, then it's good epistemology and it's good knowledge production at work, which means that the opposite of it would be bad knowledge.
So how do we weigh different types of knowledge production? How do we?
That's the purpose of the methodology that we produce, or that we provide.
What is your methodology?
Sure, we think that organic intellectuals are important to producing good knowledge, personal narratives, academic intellectuals, and then also genealogy.
So anything that's not the ignorance of the 1AC is another methodology to be evaluated, is that correct?
You could fit it in our methodology, so I'll discuss.
Okay. Quick question. Why don't you have a Neg wiki?
That's time. While that's being flashed, what's the order?
To all cases.
Debate, I was told that I would become a better speaker. I would use to improve my English skills, communicating with others, and economically gain with others. It's all over again. I started out small, going 3-3 at tournaments. No one recognizing me being Centennial, KK, the team who people look up to. You do not know who the Crew brothers are. You only know that Centennial, KK, team points and say, oh, look at those girls learning to debate. So, well, I'm working hard to win tournament. My hard work, looking hard through students that similar to traditional forms of debate, and turned me into a model minority. This year, I chose to engage who I am. My experience was a diversity. My brother, Daryl Burton, exposure to non-traditional arguments. Like, Cole and I embraced the narrative of the yellow body as counter methodology to expose the myths of the model minority through a process of conscientization, a counter methodology, a marriage to liberate, oppress, and make debate, a fair society, rhetorical silence, protects the invincibility of whiteness, as a Crenshaw 97, rhetorical silence, protects the invincibility of whiteness because it reflects the sustain the assumption of whiteness and natural condition of white also know it makes it a massive existence, makes it denial of white person, loss of white, logical system, being both over most present, after the possible market, same body in relation with after market, the unspoken and unstable whiteness, shifted from society and biological roots that exists in the rooted, presenting differential racism, neo-racism is targeted against immigrants, challenging this racism is critical to spur more effective movements against racism. Valmar in 2005, Lane, which is expressing a new lasting articulation of social problem and collective representation. We have to determine what something was longevity development, the concept of immigration and substitute for racial compromise for the poor, school, and suffer discrimination, xenophobic violence, racist stereotypes, and central sociological, signified by biological, racial dominance, biological heredity, cultural different racism, not probably the superior, differential racism, the new form of racism has manifested itself in the myth of a minority, the myth or trade Asian Americans are solely hard working on their methodology focused on the Asian body and exposing this business is critical. A myth of the model minority is a better starting point to breaking down the disrespect and debate data, the affirmative criticism in China in 93, and Asian Americans are portrayed as hardworking, intelligent, and successful, believing in the model minority, not to justify ignoring the unique discrimination by Asian Americans. You find a racial minority focus on hard work to the model of social respect, saying that they're coming out of the social reality, however, because it's a label and tool and person portrayal, however, by the existence of person discrimination against Asian Americans, legitimizing oppression against Asian Americans, all the folks that are actually the Asian community, which has really audience unsympathetic to the problem of Asian American things represented, reference Yana tells about the reaction of literature plus your honest, but Asian American women wants to message offended by his militant, so other writers have been more militant, they say they were not offended by the Black Americans, Chicano, Native Americans, or writing they understood the anger expressed by the Black and Chicano and MSI, see Native Americans, Asian Americans, and made me angry because because I did not even know Asian Americans felt the pressure, the minority members of pressure, Asian Americans invisible, to be outside also moves out social service, Asian Americans, and about 60 officers are defunding of social service calls and distribution, excluding Asian Americans from the opportunity program, this income disparity for Asian Americans, including Asian Americans that having more workload or household wage disparity, or having wage geographical locations considered, works at $2,500 per minority who are playing for African American Latino program to get those Asians and to make it into this country just by the mediocrity approved by the Asian American people was in racial minorities that are playing free services Asian American among African American Latino and poor white minorities served as a convenient scapegoat of Korean Americans. Los Angeles is discovered during the riot to many Korean Americans now presents us as a human shield constituting the majority ignorant the black minority, the one minority the state of Los Angeles hierarchy which stands for Asian Americans. Our performance all conscientization process of naming our world and understanding force of pressure results in real world change. Also achievement 2007 conscientization being able to make our world being pledged education right now understanding the force of pressure have on my process also conscientization will make it in the world to work in the show more dynamically subtracting self to inspire people to work against the pressure being able to active transforming the world making the world as a force step forward changing the next off is he just said that the government must defend the economic gain into a top country is a good idea. The top provides opportunity for black to be explored about modern day politics and gain important training to become active and meaningful participate in modern day decision making to avoid the discussion of the topics to refer to historical discriminatory and to take some practice and utilize to disparage something like to if your position was in society what's it in 33 he goes after the very text required political act and lawsuits and environmental to enlighten thoroughly legal terms not supposed to discuss nation of the day as future terror and work with the legal nation of the day he goes over tell the people politicians experience to people that secure on another important tax of how often when they have a fire and favorable public will not do someone breaking that unbridled information outside the state makes it reasonably possible it destroys the dialogue is aimed for the links to the government as a hot dog in 2008 the debate given is a based on pre-designed scenarios and indirect communicate with the game planning and dialogue debating about central people and element of current the game technical element for the end possibility for research making a sort of balance of manifest some of the dynamic manner one lost without one to sort of people online some who is something really something knows it's not and delegates of monologues of the most important bullshit dialogue. Now first, the advancing dialogue goes with side monologue debate. First directed on some basic barriers and sort of are exclusive substance for top action. Not for the same dialogical benefits that the benefits of the top action now in 2007 is that top dialogue that argument in order to something opportunity for it's about the target and require something for the session and then somebody share equity software to the attack I'm going to share that takes a moment for both the very small side participating in the dialogue, training and substitute top action, not dialogical benefit, top action. Now, all the reasons why engagement is bad is a reason to vote on negative engagement means we know the tactics of the pressure can bring it down to going to insanity. There's a moment to some of the program that's a little stiff that power over the environment, which are benefits to bring early opportunities on the next company. Working the power structure rules should be according to the method of the pressure that available. In fact, there's no should be tax funded now, so self-discrimination, application, and people enter the organs of the establishment. Institution socially and self-imposed isolation initiated by the cross-allegations military revolution against the premier the helping for joint man government should be equipped with method of pressure can battle the for the oppressor effective requires the taxpayer and also the high release of sophisticated after the natural forces of oppression have a perfect allocation system and for social online the efforts of oppressor making pressure of the entire dashboards that incorporate that people enter the organs of establishment that go on the case. First, the openness of debate is more than the affirmative students and pessimistic view in debate is unjustified to people hating the activity, the negative connotation. The affirmative should be rejected because debate is a home for many people. It's not just it may not be perfect, but the way we engage it is crucial. The way the affirmative engagement prevents the dissent, the permutation of truancy will make it just as long as the counteradvocacy that stops it unfolded. This is the same dissent that they want to see. It criticized. Debate is a bad institution. So why are you asking acknowledging it from a bad institution? Why does the affirmative tie themselves down to a community that shuts out the voice? Why do they need the ballot and introduce these arguments? The academia in the first place, the effort to do software to offer for passive knowledge for something that is the worst form of violence in Bolivia. In 94, you must denounce our application of charity capitalism, worst form of violence and extraction of humanitarian response, very costly institution of becoming equivalent or the knowledge of all minor material expectations, they're only expressed as spiritual raw material, psychological suffering from the wisdom comes the respect for our daily life and function of attacking. There's the authenticity of the mentor for financial material offensive, second phase of one circle, yourself for witness the coffee of civil, feeling sexual, moral, sexual, equal, living a whole culture, cast all material, can't live the censorship goes on the second line of the offer, return laughable in future works, and nowadays dialogue is so important for the negative, for the government does not have the disclosure wiki, it does not even promote this dialogue. They have tried to gain the debate. There are multiple alternative concepts that they cannot support, even if the government is a good idea. Bringing it into an academic competition round is a bad idea because dialogue debate, like I said, is a game.
we acknowledge your narrative, except we do not need the ballot to affirm that narrative.
We acknowledge the narratives, but the ballot is not necessary to affirm those narratives. We can still make debate a better place without having to vote in affirmative. The speech act of the 180 itself was valuable, and means that there is no reason for a affirmative ballot.
And agree with that.
Alright, the Afro-Catholic rejection stage, literature, education is a huge policy of racial exploitation in previously was in 33 and natural century biologically to have a constitution of master self-spreading exploded to those kept by someone being when they will not have to do it. You will study the constitution and document such instruction in the to record such policy and keep people in its place.
CX.
Alright, why do you agree with
Criticism, you mean counteradvocacy?
Sure, the
You say that we have a better methodology of engaging the topic and economically engaging people through the method of one-on-one.
Alright, sure, why do you think your person's story is any different?
You say that our, like you said, debate about dialogue is important. We read our own narrative of our own adventures to go through the debate of our own identity of what the truth is.
Is that suffering an object for passive consumption?
Confused. What did you say?
You read a Carter case, it says we would use suffering to objects of passive consumption. You were suffering an object of passive
We did not use a narrative of suffering. We used a narrative of our transformation and how our journey in the day has taught us to value critical things.
So your narrative about how you're a model minority is not suffering, but my narrative about my
says that model minority is something we did. The suffering in debate was all negative. We say that these connotations are probably a bad thing and just brings suffering into the debate for the connotation. We say that as a negative, we can provide a better methodology than the affirmative.
Alright, sure, let's talk about the frame of argument. You say that it's good because black people learn about politics, so I get to learn about politics?
Yeah, you do.
Alright, then you're black people.
What? The Wilson cards are talking about these racial segregations in the action foundations. Talk about that when we include this policy and possible action, that it's the same form of justification that led to the exclusions of the black people.
Okay, let me read this part. It says the topic provides opportunity for black debaters to learn about modern day politics.
Yes.
So I learn about modern day politics, and if so, am I
You
black?
say that the affirmative must prevent the economic engagement to the topic country is a good idea. That's how you learn about modern day politics. That's how you engage in the topic. That's how you engage in activity.
We're not saying defend the policy, just like say economic engagement is good in some way. We don't like the policy. Explicitly said that we don't do anything to change current culture.
Right.
Invade the institutions to change facilities.
We say this is also a disaster methodology.
Sure.
Because the 1AC doesn't do anything. We say that performance and the methodology of the 1AC doesn't do anything. We say engaging in infiltrating the government.
It doesn't do anything about economic engagement, or it doesn't do it?
It doesn't do anything about economic
Alright,
engagement or just
where does my narrative go in the world of the framework?
You can use your narrative to use organic intellectuals and your own personal experience.
Organic intellectuals about
Organic
economic
intellectual
engagement,
and
that's
your
what
own.
Venezuela
Yes,
wants.
exactly. You can use your own personal experiences to support this economic engagement toward one of the
My narrative about
good idea. Yes.
Which one of those topics?
Mexico, Venezuela, or
I know which one, because I don't really see how that would fit.
I don't know your own
Using
personal idea.
organic intellectual in the context of this topic, like we do on the act.
Like the discussion of policy action does not include those types of narratives and those types of experiences and those types of evidence.
Right, those types of evidence. I'm talking specifically about the narrative that I read in 1AC about the debate space.
Yes, this narrative is not usually exclusive of framework.
That's it. We're taking forever.
10 minutes.
Really on top of your something.
Someone gotta do it.
Devansh, do you know who Acorn beat?
Have they advanced to this round?
Yeah.
They beat. Do you have like a doubles pairing or something?
They beat.
Right. There's one over there. I'll look at. Same high crest, but I have no idea.
Yeah. But I'm surprised though. I heard he said that.
I have 650.
Oh, nice.
What's the order?
It's going to be the app, then the dissat, and then counteradvocacy, and then the methods of Malia.
Give me 1 second.
Framework, and then it's case, framework, and then counter. And case has an overview. You're free. Several reasons to vote app. A, every time the judge votes app, we're moving gain credibility. The argument we made here is not that winning is bad, but the winning culture is bad. We think that winning is good, but not changing arguments solely for the purpose of winning when the judge votes for us. They allow us to move on further rounds so that more people can engage with us in our movement. B, we have better epistemology there. Epistemology is inherently flawed because it is viewed under a neoliberal framework and or to make a respectful decision that does not include everything that neoliberalism entails. The judge must vote for us. Our epistemology also allows for critical thinking skills because we are able to gain an indication that we wouldn't be able to get in a civics classroom. C, we are a point of disruption in the big community. We stop the status quo from happening in order to introduce new thought process for the big community. This alone warrants validating because if there's a problem within the big community, addressing it is far better than accepting it. And D, the role of the judge is an individual, analyzing policy person and teacher. Second, they should not reward bad epistemology. The role of the ballot is to the academic approach that results in the most educational outcome for all involved. Ballot is merely incidental in terms of the representation for the success of the movement. Meaningful policy education is defined as critical education. The challenge is head on paradigm thought on the line. The first question that he asks is that why are you asking knowledge from a bad institution? The genealogy is often to get this point. We have to review all of the knowledges, including the oppressed and the oppressor, which is why we ask the big community. And in addition to that, the big community will always be the oppressed and the oppressor, because there will be times where it is oppressed, times where it is being where it is the oppressor of other people. They then go and say that the objectifies education. This part is talking about like passive reading of our stories. We're not passive. It's not like passive understanding. We're asking to engage with the other people there. Third argument is that we don't have disclosure on the wiki. The app is the neg is the app is on the wiki. If they had come to us and we were neg and said, can we get like sites or something, we would have said, here is the whole like back. Like, it's the same. They then say that we don't need the ballot to confirm the narrative. Here is where the role of the ballot is really crucial because we've redefined the role of the ballot. The role of the ballot is no longer which side does the better debating. The role of the ballot is now whoever presents the better critical education. This is where the 4 tiers come in. Our first tier is the oriented intellectuals. The second tier is academics. The third tier is personal narratives. And the fourth tier is genealogy. In order for them to be able to make truth claims, they have to be able to engage in this methodology. The ballot affirms that our epistemology is good. Like I said in the overview, you can't reward bad epistemology. So even if we shouldn't win because they think that we shouldn't, they should lose because they have bad epistemology. Their next argument is the after-pessimism rejection. This card is only in the world of fiat. It says the state is best. The state doesn't do anything, even if it's negative. Move on to first of all, I think this is kind of messed up. They're talking about black people learning more about the topic. This is just another statistic because the wording of it is black people should learn more about the topic so they can go and become policymakers. This is just another statistic. If we're doing this so that they can learn more about policy so they become policymakers, it's just yeah, we have black people in this. Great, yay. The next thing they talk about is hang on, which is basically saying that clash is not key to voice. This is a bad argument. It's the fundamental truth is a scale clash. Every policy debate we've been we would be in is basically hegemony, economy, environment. I was debating suicide. I know that's how that works. I mean, if you changing a link to something doesn't mean you gain more education. That leads to scale clash and no critical education. The next argument they read is suicide debate and fairness. Neoliberalism, good arguments are a manifestation of privilege and privilege. Not everyone can make those arguments. If the goal of the activity is critical thinking, will be asked for the best time to go against arguments that are non-traditional. Forces you to approach the argument at the top in different ways. Hitting the same does asked over and over again. You can eventually find the generic strategy. This is the clash argument again. Hitting but occasionally having to switch it up in order to address something new is good for debating skills. Switch sides about learning about different sides. Any other interpretation assumes that all truths are equal, which is inherently neoliberal. I've been debating for a year. My sister now in her third year. Both of us used to debate to the extreme right of debate. If you know what these arguments are, both of us has been finite amounts of time putting costs and updates and debating whether hegemony is good or not. It doesn't ever affect the world. We live in the lives of ourselves or others, and there are still problems with debate. You shouldn't force this debate against our identity and values. The illusion of understanding the topic is dangerous. Hegemony, environment, economy, swap out of a link card and proof your respect for this change. If you're getting out of these lists from this, that's scary because you change 2 words and 1 round and now say this is investigating all parts of debate. And when the one provides some semblance of debate you haven't investigated, you freak out and then tell us to leave. They qualify this by fairness. One, without fairness, debate exists. Without people, debate does not learn how to interact with people on a personal level, and having good interpersonal relations will ensure that debate is fair enough that people won't quit. 2, they don't ask us what we think about their predictability and fairness arguments. We think that when we give you predictability and fairness in the way that you ask for it, it hurts us. We were forced to defend something we don't believe in. And 3, they make this argument of fairness and predictability without thinking about the fact that we can't predict these elite standpoints when there are pressing out in each of these arguments. Uniqueness that we can make them even better. There's only a risk that they go up. The next argument they make is that the state bad, which means that you should vote neg. First of all, fiat's not real, so we don't actually engage. Moving on to the first part, the best way to solve is to engage in the narrative. Just because we cannot empathize with Korean body, we will not attempt to do so. We will engage in the narrative and attempt to engage in both narratives with the perm. He said that there are a better starting point by, there is no starting point without us because we introduce a discussion of what truth is and what engagement is. That's another reason why the perm solve. The only way that we'll be able to actually acknowledge this is through the genealogy. This is offense on their myth of the model minority. Also, their introduction of Korean culture in the debate spaces in order to change society only propagates the issue of patriarchy. Korean culture employs trafficking of women as an economic system on Enriquez 99. The great labor situation with migrant women finds themselves being compounded by the continuing arrival of women in ports that are directly recruited for entertainment and develop fertile ground for their being victimized for sexual exploitation. Up more and more Filipinos being sold for prostitution across the U.S. military camps. It is reported that Korea ranked 5th among top destination countries of legally deployed Filipino entertainers. That the growing share of women in foreign employment reflects the dynamics and demand of the host country. The presence of U.S. military bases in Korea is certainly a magnet for trafficking of Filipinos. There are reports that Filipinos are concentrating against the base in government where around 50 military recreation centers are stops where American military servicemen go. Right there. Also, their story is disingenuous. They misappropriate their own story in the debate. Michael and Gabriel have never identified as Centennial KK, except on a formal pairing. The debate community recognize their identity as Michael and Gabriel, the Coos. They are seen as Korean, they are seen as male, they are seen as successful. They are the #1 ranked team in the United States. They have found their space. They thrive as a top team in the country, and they've not traded for the world. Also, Michael and Gabe have not been rating this argument. They adhere to traditional notions of policy debate. They read affirmative negative positions based on their strategy and utility to win debates. Competitive debates and debate practice is one that allows for exclusion, allows for dominant male structure in the community to continuously evade personal morality and ethics in debate. In addition, there, negative debates switch back and forth from one for the politics decide. To read Wilderson, they do what it takes to win. And the idea of competition and success is one that crosses the notion of exclusion and patriarchy in the community. We criticize my sister talk about this with the winning culture. Also, their experience is a footnote of the 180. They don't even advocate for the destruction of the model minority within the debate. They identify their identity is an issue, but we are called terms to interrogate the myth of the model minority in the context of U.S. engagement practices. They enjoy the status of the debate community. They love debate and its structure. Also, capital debate is more masculine domination power relationships that exist within the team itself are ones that need to be interrogated. Michael and Gabriel stand at the forefront of the dominant system. The way they prepare for terms, the discussions they have with team members, the practice they conduct are ones that are insular to the males on our team. The power relations that exist throughout the organization are ones that allow for men to dominate women and view us as inferior.
CX.
First talk about this in general. Capital debate is patriarchal. Explain. Explain.
How capital debate is patriarchal?
Yes.
The power relations, I mean, like...
Power relations in a debate team where we work with you, we talk with you, we discuss you, we practice.
Let me actually give you a real example. This happened at the retreat, and obviously none of the judges will know about it, but I distinctly remember it because it happened between you and I. You and I were in the same room, we were judging a practice debate. You gave your comments, the other male on like the panel, so to speak, gave his comments, and you both walked out of the room without even looking at me to see what I said. And it hurt.
Wait.
It really hurt.
So you're saying that bring this into a competition round, bring these personal stories, bring these hate speeches, it's better for debate?
It really
This is going to promote your dialogue.
reality.
No, will this promote your dialogue? This is going to promote your open form of debate that people don't accept each other.
Okay, we're trying to like engage with you. We're trying to tell you
You're
what's wrong with
You're
the
saying that
society.
we're bad and that we are...
Like, you can close your eyes to what you've done. That's fine.
No, but like, how do you engage them? How is bringing these hate speeches and these accusations into debate good?
Okay, first of all, they're not accusations. Second of all, I'm just telling you what you did. If you don't defend what you do, then don't do it. Like, your actions don't
We never won these charges. We've been paraphrases this entire tournament was breaking down the myth of the model minority. What is your bright line for running these arguments?
So they're what?
What's your bright line for when we can and cannot run these arguments?
You mean for what?
You say that we historically have not run the myth of the model minority. Why? How? We have been reading this since the poverty topic, the military topic, the space topic. How?
Okay, that's okay. First of all, what I'm talking about there is that before Bronx, y'all changed your act because it was TBA and then TBA passed.
Wait. So, like, people who are traditional policy cannot gain the education of performance demerits and have an ethical stance. Like, they just can't switch over. They're just gonna keep people who are traditional.
So you're gonna argue that something you feel so strongly about and to like bring it into the debate space.
Wait, but
you don't have to bring it in all the
Is that a good
time.
form of debate to keep people who are traditional?
I'm sorry.
Like, can I never switch over and change my opinions? Is that a good form of debate?
Is that what you did when TBA passed? You just changed, like, because TBA passed,
Now, here's the
I
question.
changed my opinions on how I feel about myself being free.
You also consider that we've been debating traditional policy for
Yes,
past years. Why
and
aren't
you know what?
considering this?
Okay, the reason I changed was because I realized that my exclusion in the debate community was like a bad thing.
And how do you
I
know?
realized
How do you
that
know who me and Michael? How do you know who me and Michael? How do you know why we switched? Why are they? What like?
I talked about that. On the negative, you read the politics to that, and then you read Wilderson. Like,
We have not
last
read the
time you
politics
hit
to
our
that.
ass, you're in a framework.
When the last time I went to the politics is that?
I'm not around.
That's when
Exactly. You could not know this.
Okay. 10 minutes.
I can't speak for past debate, but I think it's about
It's a debate about what debate should be about, and because these kids are invested in this activity, I think they just get emotional because it is important. It's not necessarily, it could be a tactic. Well, I don't want to say tactic. It's, I don't know, it's just, it's important to them. So they are, go ahead.
Yeah, it's 8:07.
That's what Andrew's telling me I should eat it.
Food. Cafeteria.
I don't know. It was delivered to me as I was looking for like trash.
Alright. Going to be the counteradvocacy and then the case.
Where and what?
The counteradvocacy and then the case.
Alright, thanks.
The way you put yourself in the debate should be to oppress liberated groups. There are multiple problems with the entirety of the Wednesdays before something is many others after the French islands. You are the rhetorical science of whiteness, the world. You talk about disrespecting debate, you talk about it, but you do not interrogate any sort of whiteness within the Wednesday. The French islands is that whiteness for race society, for race policy, that's what causing the problems. Your discussion neoliberal is not enough. The one time they mention race in the Wednesday is in the underlined part of the card that they don't even care about this. This is the legal commission that turns their performance into that because you know it's racism. No, we didn't read this card except racism. It should be an independent reason to vote the other team down because they are explicit saying they're trying to expose some problems in the debate, except explicitly say silent regulation, things like the Kentucky Brown, things like the problems happening at the Bronx. All these are issues that need to be discussed that they do not discuss. And there's still honest alone should be linked because the Wednesday explicitly said that they defend all 8 minutes of the performance and only those 8 minutes of the performance, which is the reason why he explicitly knows us. On the second argument is that we captured alcohol, your office person that you don't have a methodology, you only have a performance. We're the only ones with a methodology continues outside the way. Conscientization, the process of how Asian Americans relate and know the world. All these are things that break down oppression. It's also explicit says that it's the only way we can break down because we interrelate with experience. It captures office. First of all, it's organic intellectual. Robert King is organic intellectual. He explicitly says that trying to break down these racial findings. The second argument is that OSG makes academic intellectual. He has a PhD. He does multiple studies for this Asian American. He does interviews and talks with people and do this. We have our personal experience with I want you to watch game today in the 180. I don't know if you link your own office because she explicitly says in the 180 that every other team ignores her personal experience. I let her talk in the 180 process. Why didn't you quit today? What was wrong with you? Except when she has an explicit said that our personal experience and how we came to this realization so bad, which is a performance double term with the entire performance, because we explicitly said that we do not want to be the model minorities anymore, which is something we've been running ever since the pass on Georgetown, something that we have not been disingenuous about for the entirety of the tournament. You do not know when we researched this up front. You do not know what thoughts we had. You do not know the conversation Gabe and I have with each other and with other people, which is the reason why you should not have the audacity to make these types of arguments, not the less arguments about the truth claims. We don't have a bad epistemology. She does assert this all over the 280, but does not have a warrant for our epistemology bad. The closest she ever gets with the competition arguments, but I'm going to blow up there a little bit later. Now the permutation should not be allowed because why is it that you explicitly defend all ignorance of the performance and everything you have done, which is the reason why they don't get a permutation, because this debate is a question about methodology. The one is a static artifact in competition with the one is discourse and the entire Neg speech. The judges merely choose in the concept which is a better way to engage in the assumption of whiteness. I counter that is a performance time because you advocate the ignorance of the way while we advocate conceptualization to bring down the myth of the mind. Now the second argument is that the permutation is the question of whiteness. Whiteness just uses the permutation as an excuse to ignore these methodologies. This is an exclusionary argument because you were trying to exclude our performance because we did not know how to engage in which will be the suicide debate and the framework arguments in the one area. This quality strategy is used to break down performances and better methodologies. If we prove that our methodology is better, that's why this actually now this side is their permutation is the myth of the mind because the structure of white supremacy never allow examination of both methodologies. They will use them against one another. Asians are the Darwin of the right now. The bias are used to police minority bias and claim that they're suffering just a product of their own internal fortune. That is a challenge. It's also this identity. Grouping together oppression is a tactical power. Once together, all minorities having one problem with specific issues are critical. That's the Lorian 77. Liberation theology to the common friends of oppression living. Adherent classified minorities and still people seeking liberation. Thus classification is the way to eliminate specific population, clever way to avoid the cycle. Liberation theology is a way to give keep minor people circling the wide with the main politics of living oppression. Does not see destroy whose oppression really shines away, manual oppression back itself. You may devise clever ways to refuse to share the power, but keeps it is obviously things get outscored. Also, your silence is a legal convention because racial oppression of black Latinos and white folks discuss unsuspecting individuals. This fails over discrimination of Asian Americans. Now we have multiple terms case arguments versus the debate community because the myth of the minorities will create the debate community in the first place. Performance teams are people going to Centennial picking and be like performance teams. Why can't you just debate like Centennial where they defend a race out for the context? Why can't you do that? Which is puts unmerited pressure on them and leads to exclusionary discriminatory practice, which is it also works in broader society because people point to Asians and say the two other minorities. Why can't people get hard at which is what white supremacy uses to justify the black cultural power? These are two conceded impact coming the one see now the disingenuity arguments for this the framing issue. You do not know who we are. You do not know what process we came to before this round. You did not know the discussion because you barely even come to practice. All these are things that are good. All these are arguments that makes it audacious to even assume that we are disingenuous because you do not want to know when through our process of mind. Now, conceptualization independently solves this. This is also the critical thinking comes from conceptualization. The importance of taking information, conceptual tools to outline, understand, so important about rights and education, key sources, more make a difference. The school has not talked about racial and Asian American experience, divided experience, other Asian American, structural overcome coalition, the community Asian American education with you, the way to transfer understanding into action, consent, knowledge, and learn from efforts to exchange, finally consultation, occurs with this discrete elements for combination without purely intellectual experience, absent social elements, being said about quick, fast, and related experience, where I can seek to raise the computer class of Asian American. So that's in some contemplated economy, the foundation necessary for the people who see a relation board. There's a value need to offer a range of experience community from breaking down binary structure, happening groups against you like having context, the right of people and supposed to combine lessons from a variety of forces. We are not only doing this to gain a ballot, which is an argument that you linked to because your performance is used to gain a ballot. When I asked Wendy Crossan, are you willing to forfeit the ballots and have a discussion? She explicitly said no, which is linked to your own performance arguments and the reason why they also link to other competition backgrounds. They're just trying to get your ballot and they don't have a student and they don't have any single excuse or a verifiable one for why they need the ballots and have discussions. All these discussions are relevant in the debate round because the ballots not needed, which is the reason why you link to this argument too. Now the third argument is that we don't now the third argument about the cross-examination. Gabe did not try and exclude your voice. He explicitly had an argument which came in after the round, which is the reason why he was the last to leave. He did not leave that room. And also the fourth argument is that you cannot verify these types of crucial debates involving personal experience and personal attack against another. That is a bad form of debate that should be rejected because teams will end up lying and cannot verify these things either, which is what their type of debate justifies, which is the reason. Any reason why the affirmative is bad is a reason to fall back and forth, even if the negative methodologies are better reason. Now finally, she says that capital debate is masculine. First of all, capital debate is your team. She does not give me a specific example of how we do it. In fact, the reason her old partner that oppressed her was someone that I helped get over. Do not forget who told your old partner that she needs to stop making you dumb ones. I was the person, or at least one of the people who helped to get you over that. I was the one who said this is a bad system. I was the one who said that she needed to be messed up and actually criticized her multiple times that you did not even know about because I didn't think I had to glorify myself and tell you about these arguments. We do not link to these arguments. It's not a reason to present them because you do not know our story. All these are reasons why therefore to be that it should be protected within these stats scores. The disingenuous arguments are also very vacuous because you read traditional affirmatives before too. Just saying that we did it for a couple forms is vacuous and there's no bright line for this argument. You see that you went through a process of understanding during the summer. Do you know that we did not go through the same process before this tournament? All these are reasons why the arguments cannot be verified. The case arguments, the 4 points of the overview are captured by the 4 points of the overview captured by Counteradvocacy. Also the epistemology part argument did not have a warrant. Don't make the one that's the one I make the argument because negative plus strategy was predicated off the 2AC. Make sure before you evaluate any one arguments, you can draw a line to the 2AC before you can do it. The genealogy arguments is that the genealogy the debate of precedent and genealogy arguments is not a reason that are proposed that. If you really need a verification from the disrespect activity, that should not be the case because you are like a crack addict. You're asking for more verification, which is a bad form because you need the verification in the form of balance in order to gain verification and credibility for movement. Just saying that the battle leads to more credibility is a modification argument in itself, and the motion argument supports this argument being specifically saying that the switch side debates arguments and the role of the ballot. She says this which side does better education. If it's just which side does better education, it's just speech has placed against one another, which is the reason why the counter methodology is competitive.
CX. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, shh. What attribute, if you don't mind?
The myth, I don't mind over here.
Okay. And why did you decide to read framework if that's your app? Like, how's that consistent?
We are not a regular framework argument. I don't think you understand that. We're arguing that switch side thinking is good, and also you just need to affirm the topic in order to infiltrate the systems and take it down. You fundamentally misunderstand our framework argument as an exclusion argument. No, we say that this framework is a better form of education. And also, all we say is that you need to discuss the topic, which is something our app does.
Is it a better form of education just for black people, or?
Our cards take the example of the black people, but the Williams evidence is a little bit more generic, saying that if we gain this education, we can use it to tear down state institutions.
Okay, then why have you written that the sole purpose of it is to make sure that black people can talk about or become law?
Because that's what the historical example is. That's an example for our broader argument. Wasn't it evidence that black people are excluded from society and only chose to discuss issues such as black votes for white politicians instead of actual issues of the day, such as trade, the World Trade Center, criminal justice, healthcare, etc. That kind of exclusion is bad.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your narrative?
What do you want to know about my narrative? We say at this debate, in the debate space, we're tired of being treated as fellow minorities. Thus, we have decided to perform the topic. We say that positive conservation is a good thing.
So
You started
why
this
do you
debate.
debate?
What?
Why do you debate?
I debate because that's one method we want to. You debate an education space where you get to interact with people.
Do you like debate?
Yes.
Okay. For how long did you get treated as like the Centennial KK team instead of
That was an ongoing experience throughout the entire of my paper.
That's irrelevant. That's missing the important in there.
no, you're missing the point. I'm not like trying to critique your narrative. I'm trying to indeed.
How long do
Please don't be so
engage in traditional falsehood? It's an irrelevant question that we are
The engagement turned hostile as soon as you call us disingenuous and ingenuous,
Alright, that's fine.
which is the reason why performance is bad.
Alright, what's going on?
the opening is a still one and all there.
frame.
Sorry, did you say something before the this had?
No.
Just you go ahead.
The 1AC is important, however, it's just a description of the atrocity of the 1AC. Was damning when Michael asked, do you change economic behavior? And she said no. Well, debating the exclusion that performance is insufficient to make real world change. Ask yourself from the 1AC, what is the performance or the methodology of the 1AC? Notice that you do not have a description of a pragmatic action to be able to change the state of debate. It only leads to personal ad hoc attacks like the ones going around in debate who say that having a process and a methodology such as concentration, and therefore their articulation, the methodology, the use of the federal government shows a disservice to the education of black people and regular people throughout debate. There are first argument says this is a racist obstruction. No, it's not tonight. It's just a political working through the role playing of federal government. The name oppression is almost backward. So the exclusion, historical practice, white supremacy is after what's going on the state is a effective way to solve for the suppression of Franklin 93 needed to court conference of practice to deliver the US and the no facility involvement in the direction that reflects a commitment to a such goal for the point of people who must work to obtain the goal of the United States who conduct ourselves in utopian can already just interesting achievement. Now they say clashes, but your experience and they say that her experience is bad, but your experience is no better than mine. There's no way to weigh one's experience and another. As long as you have your experience backing each other up, that means there's no epistemology to say to these arguments. Yeah, Paul's going to debate might be bad, but the act does not do anything to change. We say the affirmative must engage and say economic engagement. Because which I debate turns these arguments because you are not as ideological, you are self-reflecting, you are able to change the debate that you are in limiting discussion to specific academic is critical actualize government space of debate, enforcement, the in-depth class, and analysis that helps develop critical thinking skills. Which I debate, defend their position, especially it goes against your belief for country to question your ideas and defend every angle. It forces people from broader ideological control that effective deliberation is crucial to activate creation of personal agency. Robert Semple Neg or three people are in focus on subjectivity experience. Especially with one of preventing engaging deliberation action and reflecting after the Holocaust. But each one people who did not see and expect to be put towards the not their own agency can be persuaded by these stop actions or never see by anyone who can develop policy solution and academic that are not some more, but the arguments invention and argument one, but which because often necessary consequence the difference in critical thinking possible and where one say that other inspection academics and demand trust and for perceptive things and political consequence of academics and academics theory healthcare political system be actively on by the comfort form of the bureaucracy evil if the people that's what will resist dogma that they say that neoliberalism is bad and we only reach with the discipline the will of company we must role-play doing engage in the resolution because then we get to infiltrate the government we get to learn the tools of the pressure the more ridiculous these advocates the more nuclear war we get to more we are able to persuade these oppressors and be able to speak in the language of power to be able to destroy the neoliberal policies in general just by criticizing the state of debate but not do anything to do with the neoliberal policies that they critique in Venezuela which wants the cross-sex the one team we will have to infiltrate these institutions to be able to do that only learning the Montgomery House having a personal attack will not be accepted in the halls of power which therefore debate does not preclude having a counteradvocacy and having a further middle minorities and better public discourse to be able to do that. Now they make a fairness argument. We did not make a fairness standard. This is not a traditional notion of framework. We are defending that you should infiltrate the government to be able to bring that republican resolution, stop the education, the political action to be able to make a pragmatic policy action and make changes in the state of debate, including the state of debate. If we do not engage the community of debate by having a 8-minute hate speech agenda, we can never understand what to do and what to change about the debate, which we return all these arguments. Now, she said Fiona is not real. Yes, Fiona is not real. That's the point really hard to consider. Fiona is an educational tool that teaches us the language of America in order to be able to break that down. They do not. They have an erroneous assumption that causes self-premature isolation from the activity. They are just taking themselves out of the state of debate and are not affecting any of the changes in the debate just by reading what you see their performance that way.
So, saying that under offense, we say that the defense theory is still a problem. There's a reason that we're not just like a regular brain violation. All you need to do is find a stance, an ideological stance that increasing economic engagement in some form, not even a policy is good. The one who doesn't
consider that having an ideological stance and increasing economic engagement of some sort of policy action is very good. They critique, you say Venezuela may be their connection to the topic, however,
that wasn't your choice. You don't have to make that.
That was not in the two. So you do not let them make any new money arguments. They have messed up this world of flow, assuming that it's a traditional policy framework. Yes, even if debate is bad right now, that is just uniqueness for us investigators. Another reason we should engage debate and be resolution to be able to change that. Otherwise, we just isolate ourselves from these actions and call them reproduces these terms that they state in the what they say. What's better, engaging debate or not engaging at all, and then these impacts continue.
They don't have a methodology to create change.
They don't have a methodology to create change.
How much time do I have?
650. Okay.
Thank you. It's going to be case, the framework, this
243.
argument, and then for the counter-argument.
Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, sure. Case, the framework, this argument, and then the counter-argument. the reason why we need the ballot is because the movement gains credibility. These are all answers to the one part that he said. The movement is going to gain credibility through the ballot because unfortunately the debate world that we live in wins our currency. And second, the epistemology question of how we create truth claims. We present a methodology that when you see that, if it is affirmed and if it is true, then that is something that we want to use to evaluate truth claims in other debates. See, it's a point of disruption from neoliberalism. Indeed, the role of a judge as a teacher, which means that epistemology does matter. Also, he says there's no methodology, but that's for a reason. It's because we're not passive. We invite a discussion. There's a reason why we don't take an action post the 1AC, and it's because we don't have all the knowledge that we possibly have to make that decision, and we don't feel like we have a sufficient amount, which means that we want to have this engagement, we want to have this discussion, and this is valuable enough that we think we don't take an action until we hear their subjugated knowledge and their subjugated history. There's a reason why that doesn't happen. Go to the dissent. He says that the 1AC is insufficient for real world change. I'm kind of offended. What the heck is real world change? Because fiat isn't real. He should know the 1AC is the closest it gets because he reads the Crenshaw evidence, which means that exposure is important. If exposure is important, then the 1AC is as close as it gets to real world change. He also says that it's a disservice for black people because we don't role play. But you can learn how to role play in civics class these days. Debate doesn't teach you how to become a policymaker. It teaches you possibly what policymakers might do because they definitely don't talk about things like nuclear war. They talk about a lot of stuff, and they definitely talk about the things that the 1AC discusses, which is things like interpersonal relations and social issues within a community. That's important for becoming a policymaker. Debate doesn't teach you how to get there, which is what a lot of minorities probably need more. Also those people, the minorities' voices aren't valued enough in debate for them to actually have any agency, which means that regardless, like, my voice wasn't valued in debate, which means that I didn't get much of my education for all 2 years, which Mike probably knows. Also, he says that we can't weigh experiences, so there's no epistemology to said. There is, it's a method of producing knowledge, which would be the epistemology to said, not the way that we weigh our personal narratives. Also, the Roberts-Miller card is talking about, first of all, being effective policymakers, which we're not, and two, we don't disengage ourselves from the argument, which is what Roberts argues is a good thing. We have a passion for these ideas, would argue that we're a prerequisite because when debaters quit, they don't have a passion for ideas that they can develop into the best policy. We're a prerequisite that because we develop a personal connection to our stories. And then he says that the state solves repression. He says that these being continuous, and then says the state solves oppression. If it does solve for oppression, Asian advocacy probably should have been read with the USFG actor. On the switch side debate terms, he forgets that first of all, we debated switch side, and second of all, switch side debate is not a reason why they should win the round. First of all, you don't have to be something, or you don't have to become something in order to understand it. Analyzing it from an objective perspective is probably better. We talk about our personal investment. I can't talk about a personal investment in neoliberalism good because I don't have a personal investment in that. I think neoliberalism is bad. Also, he says that if it's an 8-minute hate speech, first of all, I would like to clarify that it's not hate, it's a method of exposure. Feeling oppressed isn't hate. I was looking for a discussion, which, yes, Michael, I would have given a ballot for. That's not the question you asked me in Crossing. If I thought a discussion was going to happen, yes, I would have given up that ballot. But the ballot is still important to the point where we're making truth claims, and we want those truth claims to be evaluated and used in other debate rounds, because otherwise they won't be. If we can have a discussion about it, though, I feel like that would probably make a bigger ripple, and I would have loved that. So, yes, I would have given up the ballot. Also, he says that Venezuela would not be a connection to the topic. We have to engage the resolution to make change. We do engage debate. Venezuela would be our connection to the topic. That was in the 1AC. I don't understand how that goes away. Also, the genealogy question is key to pragmatic action. There's a reason we take action, like I said. We don't take action, like I said earlier, because we have to analyze the subjugated knowledges that go behind every policy, which is the reason why there's two claims on the framework and flow. Probably not. Go to the criticism. I'm going to say sorry to Michael right here, and I want to flag this for mischaracterizing the way he engaged with me. He's right, and I'm grateful for what he did. But I'm not going to apologize for the methodology that I used to resolve this issue so that other people don't feel that way. And I'm also not going to apologize to Gabe because he blew up something that really hurt me in the past. Let's discuss the permutation. In Crossing, I said that all 8 minutes, as well as everything that I do, is a justification for offense. He keeps saying that we don't have a methodology for change. That's the reason why the permutation works. We don't have a methodology for change. They do, which means you put together our methodology for producing truth and their methodology for producing change, and you get an action. He also addresses one part of the discussion, or he doesn't address one part of the discussion to create truth. Genealogies are key to pragmatic action. That's so key. I just discussed this. Also, we don't exclude a performance. Look to the Coldray evidence. I want to engage in the discussion. I have no connection, so I'm going to tell you my issue within debate. They tell you their issue within debate. We have a discussion of voice within the debate community. That's oppression, and that's supremacy. My discussion, and I isolate what oppression looks like to me. They talk about what oppression looks like to them. That is whiteness. That is supremacy. If the words about racism really matter that much, like I say, people of color in my 1AC, I don't see how that's relevant if I'm interrogating power structures and interrogating what whiteness means to me and how it affects my interaction with debate, also how it affects other people's subjugated knowledges. Judy Butler talked about whiteness in the debate community, how it makes you feel like an outsider. Those are dominant power structures that they're Crenshaw evidence is talking about. It's not necessarily about, okay, you have to say the words black people and white people and whiteness.
How much time, Aubrey?
You have 8:06.
Their success.
Are they talking about Madeline?
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, okay.
You don't have to write everything.
No, but like, I don't know, like, so I was writing everything.
That probably means you just need to listen to what they say. So when they say, like, switch sides.
No, I did that. I'll be like, so that's like, what was the first one? What was it like? I don't miss Harry Wait, yeah. Oh, 1/8. Oh, what did you already know? It was like, you don't have like,
Alright. Counteradvocacy. Role playing. Case.
There are so many things with this methodology, just that type of stuff.
In the future, just call it framework.
Thank you. So many names.
Gone. Just
Yeah.
I appreciate the apology, but that is not a reason why you get after this as your methodology that was dropped in the 1 year here to talk that when you introduce personal experience and debate comes into debate about personal identity, that introduces ad hominem attacks against people, and which introduces the type of disingenuity and the disrespectful arguments that they are trying to be, which is adults over their performance, because they try to say that their performance all about including respect and listen to other peers as well as the ones he crosses and the ones he crosses engage in those voices. When she stands up, when Alexa stands up in the situation, she calls us disingenuous and says we are no willing running expression to benefit. What do you know about us? You do not know those assumptions. Do you have to use as offense as was modified your performance and a reason why you should vote them out, and a reason why you link to their own performance. At worst, that's a reason. At worst, that's a reason why their methodology is bad, to be a net benefit to the framework arguments I can go for. Concede the permutation. The reason I go for the counter-advocacy is because they don't have a method, so I think they're going to win the permutation. Just proves the abuse of the framework arguments and the reason why they don't solve anything because they don't have a methodology, but only an exposure of the one you see. Go to the framework right now. The debate comes down to an our interpretation of the debate versus their performance. Our interpretation that the affirmative to some sort of economic engagement. The one you crossing explicitly says that you don't meet this argument because you do not. You just say that economic engagement in the statute plan, you do nothing to change it. The keyword there is nothing to change it, and change is the only thing that matters. Your exposure to this argument is insufficient. Couple of arguments. First is the silence of whiteness to this argument because we saw this argument because we ran black framework arguments into woods and evidence and trying to create to role play arguments. You stay silent in the silence rating. Just saying people call it once in the way he does not get travelers because of question travelers. Explicitly says that it is a lingo convention when you stay on silent in question ratio. That makes it the assumed or implicit race. We are our framework introducing a type of role playing and a type of debate that introducing question rightness. The second, this was a narrative bad argument because our debate detached a little bit from personal identity. It's only a question about your arguments, not about the debate itself. So it doesn't introduce this type of disrespectful the ad-hominem attacks that the affirmative does within this debate, which is the reason. Also, the third big argument is the Williams evidence. They have critique coming out in the 1 year. The Williams evidence, they internally turn to all. It's actually a turn to all their impact terms because the Williams evidence says that whatever bad was made, watch out, whatever's bad right now, we need to embrace all of things and use it to tear down the very institutions that they question. The state isn't that will in the status quo and it's going to do bad shit. And that we need to learn about tactics of the oppression, use it against the oppression itself, which is the reason why we turn all your offense. Also, a couple of defense arguments. We did not exclude you types of affirmative. We did not exclude our affirmative because we engage in the topic and discussion of the topic and define economic engagement as a metaphor. We did not exclude affirmatives like Bronx law because Bronx law says that they engage in history of economic engagement with Cuba. Those topical discussions are all things that we don't exclude, which is the reason why we don't
appealing to your offensive arguments. The line by she said that why you see exposure is good and to try to concede the question items. The why you see did not expose the question of race was the question items specifically about the arguments about how they refused to give up their ballots when I asked for explicitly crossings. The reason why they linked their own commodification arguments, the reason why they're only trying to do it in the question of the why you see arguments about how the truth claims is good. There's no impact to the truth claims argument. What does the truth claim gain? These are all questions unanswered by the 1 yard and the rest of the firm's speech. No new 2 8-yard arguments because I'm going to be able to answer this. Only a valid argument if you try length to the 1 yard and the 2 AC with another argument will take trial. Now she says that policymakers are now learning about other things in debate. We change the nature of debate. All the things that we're not learning about right now is she needs this more than negative because we can learn how to do this. Which side debate argument also to solve this argument because it fosters you guideline and respect that the one she's looking for. It is not just after that, but switching your thinking in order to gain education from both sides. It allows you to look at both sides of the issue and not be antagonistic and ideological. If you assert that the debate can be terrible and only believe that, then you isolate yourself from interacting with the rest of the debate coming devolved into academic tests like the one that affirmative environment. Now she says that minority versus aren't represented. First of all, that argument was not in this way. And the second argument said that she needs for us because of minority versus aren't represented. But Wilson says that if you try to exclude these minority voices from a question of public discussion, not only seeks to exclude it even more. The Williams card impacted and says that minority voices need to take the tools of the state and use examples. She says that we use knowledge. Not just you said that economic engagement is not new foreign knowledge production. It's all about change of new foreign knowledge production. Only interpretation because this all is also role-playing solving starting because we could use it. I don't know to take it down. The Roberts indictment is not responsive because even if he doesn't have personal connection, that's a whole side of the entire debate. It's involved to try for personal connection, use something new and use that to look at other people's views. That means that fosters the respect and the tolerance and the dialogue that front of the negative look for. She says that the agent counteradvocacy should have done. First of all, she can't make it perform a double to argument into 1 AR. Don't let them do that. Also, the second argument is that the agent counteradvocacy interrogated the topic economic engagement towards like our brother, which is the reason why we know later. She said that she debated to their side. That is a new argument in the 1 AR. It also is not impacted. Don't do that work for them. So because it's a debate like debate, one about competing interpretations versus your performance, which is the reason why even if you debate switch side impacts, what you just like in this round that matters. She said that she would have given up the ballots. That argument was incoherent and not within the tweets. Another reason why you should not do it. She says that we engaged in debate. She engaged in a debate, a discussion about the topic. That was a new argument. There was absolutely no argument in this way. She also explicitly says that you don't change economic injuries and not the case. The case arguments, the valid arguments of credibility. The morality for them does not give them more credibility. Exposure is not enough. They're trying to do it for an disrespectful society, which is the reason why their ballot only gets commodified and gets used against it, which is the reason why they're voting for the affirmative does not produce any support change.
Probably start working on this. That was a wise move. What? Not a wise move. You're not a wise move. Oh, okay.
out with intention of 2 minutes. Yep, that's it.
There's going to be a overview on this.
Genealogy is one word, the way that we can evaluate what is true and what isn't. All four tiers must be present for the methodology to be effective. Our genealogy of our histories within the debate community is incredibly important to producing real change. We can't jump to conclusions in action without evaluating every subjugated voice. You can't get the perspective of history from a piece of evidence. Talking about Asian Americans outside of debate, you can't get those subjugated knowledge from a singular perspective. A genealogy of knowledge that doesn't get exposed. Not only you have to do with pragmatic action, because that's an oppressive knowledge. Your framework may be different from the one you read. Again, you read against this last time, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the same game. The other aspects of the knowledge production process that we search for truth are also important. Looking parts of the knowledge that came from personal narrative, because there's something that the oppression within debate that we can't understand from the perspectives of the oppressor. Organic intellect is important because it shows the solidarity and element is repeatability. When we give a software personal story and content of other people's stories, we've achieved an element of connection of other people, oppressed people, so that we can create a more general idea of truth rather than something true for only ourselves. That's part of what justifies the 1AC. We read the 4 tiers academic intellectuals, people considered experts on the topic. We analyze neoliberal elites, create this app so we could agree with them on the benefits of neoliberalism. We achieved a consensus obviously predicated upon the demographics of people included and excluded by the neoliberal system. The only argument he makes in case is that exposure means that the ballot is basically commodification. This is an argument they made before that we answered and said, basically what we said is that we are not like a passive movement. We don't merely talk about for the understanding purposes. We want to engage with the other side, which is why we read it in debate, and we don't give speeches to people on framework law. First of all, he talks about ad hoc attacks. He gave us the story so we know another part of him. That's why we're not going to attack his voice now. Before, we didn't get it. We didn't have his perspective. Now, once his voice is in the sphere, we're not going to attack his voice because we don't. We know what's wrong and what's right now. Then he moves on to the narrative is bad, but this is another example that we realized we were wrong and we stepped back. The performance is basically a discussion. We allow ourselves to and it also allows us to ground ourselves in other people's knowledge. It's like a checks and balances system. If we think we're right and someone else thinks we're wrong, we have to engage in their voice and decide who we think is right and who they think is right. He then goes on to talk about switch side debate postures like respect. First of all, you don't have to be part of it. Extend that argument here. You can't understand all of it. I'm never going to understand what he feels at the hands of being a Korean and amid this minority. I'm never going to understand that. So I don't intend to understand that. So yeah. Then he moves on. He never explains why this exposure is bad. He keeps saying exposure is bad. He never really explains that. Don't allow him this argument. He then talks about the link of omission. First of all, this is not a word pick. So, when we're talking about in the affirmative, the respect and exclusion and disrespect in the debate community, we don't have to say racism or white-black binaries. It's basically, it's one and the same. Onto the knowledge production, our methodology comes first. He doesn't provide backing for his truth claims on framework, although he concedes the methodology. He doesn't provide backing for his truth claims on the framework. He only provides academics and just analytics. They don't give the perspectives of the genealogies, the personal narratives, and the organic intellectual. Then he concedes that debate is an academic activity. If it's an academic activity, that means we have to look at all of the academic part of the activity, which means that we have to evaluate by the truth claims and the 4-tier methodology. All of his race arguments assume fiat. We engage in the metaphorical round, which means that he's not going to ever solve for racism. Well, I just explained that argument why we would solve for racism with the disrespect and exclusion of the debate community. He then talks about evidence, we're an infiltration of the state of debate. It's like the United States federal government and the debate community. We only talk we're talking about the debate community and how we're going to introduce change in the debate community. Yes, we're not going to change the United States federal government. Because it's not real. In the app, we talk about exposure and how exposure is key because it allows us to engage with other people. Not only does he never explain why exposure is bad, but here I'm going to explain why exposure is good. First of all, we engage with other sides. We get all voices. Means that our 4-tier methodology comes into play there. We can check and balance our views with other people's views. Second of all, the exposure means that we can form claims based on our